think, Marge. All I need is a title.
Wired for sound.
There we go, there we go, there we go. There we go. There we go. Let's go, baby. Everybody touch somebody. Touch somebody. Touch somebody. There we go. What's up, buddy?
How you doing, big guy? Good to see you, man. Unbelievable.
How are you, dude?
Doing good, man.
I got so much damn respect for you. I want to be out here getting so bad.
Vice versa. Same way.
Hey, listen, I've never done this before, but I would love to get a jersey.
Sure. Let's do it. I'll get you after the game.
I want.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired! You know, some owner's going to do that. He's going to say, that guy that disrespects our flag, he's fired. And that owner, they don't know it. They don't know it. They're friends of mine, many of them. They don't know. They'll be the most popular person for a week. They'll be the most popular person in this country, because that's a total disrespect of our heritage. That's a total disrespect of everything that we stand for, okay? Everything that we stand for.
After those comments, players across the league started taking the knee during the national anthem as a protest against the president's remarks. Never mind that the president has the same First Amendment rights that all the rest of us have, and never mind that these players are very handsomely rewarded for playing 16 games over the course of a little over 5 months per year. What really do they have to protest about in a country that allows them to live such a life? As the protests carried on over into a second week last week, they seemed to die down. The Dallas Cowboys and the Arizona Cardinals met in the middle of the field. They knelt before the anthem, then stood as it was being played. Support for Green Bay Packers quarterback Aaron Rodgers' idea of linking hands in solidarity with the NFL against the president's remarks fell flat, as they should have. And within a few weeks, this entire mess should die down. The problem is this. This is a picture of a children's football game, and as you can see, the children are kneeling during the national anthem. This is a problem because you know these children didn't come up with this. This was brought on by the parents or coaches, or all of them. It's a despicable thing to bring children into any adult conversation, whether it be about politics or religion or anything else where children have no right being involved. Let the children play the game and learn the leadership and good character that comes from being involved with high school or even college sports. Children's sports is not a place for politics or religion. Some people will say that the players are simply exercising their First Amendment rights. However, this is erroneous thinking, as the employer can curtail the speech of their employees while they are on the clock. This has been done with me on 2 separate occasions, and it's done to prevent disruptions at the workplace, or to prevent employees from discussing controversial topics with others, including possibly customers. An employee has whatever freedom of speech that is allowed by the employer. In the case of the national anthem protests, the NFL has largely been supportive of the players, while owners like Robert Kraft of the New England Patriots, Arthur Blank of the Atlanta Falcons, Stephen Ross of the Miami Dolphins, and Jed York of the San Francisco 49ers each issued statements ripping the Trump comments, but did not seem to comment directly on the player protests. As I said earlier, I believe these protests around this issue will die down once the novelty is worn out and once the players are no longer basking in the attention they are getting from all of this.
I think it's gonna be a long, long time till touchdown bring me round again and find I'm not the man they think I am at home. Oh, no, no, no. I'm a rocket man. Rocket man. Burning out his fuse out here alone.
No one has shown more contempt for other nations and for the well-being of their own people than the depraved regime in North Korea. It is responsible for the starvation deaths of millions of North Koreans and for the imprisonment, torture, killing, and oppression of countless more. We were all witness to the regime's deadly abuse when an innocent American college student, Otto Warmbier, was returned to America only to die a few days later. We saw it in the assassination of the dictator's brother using banned nerve agents in an international airport. We know it kidnapped a sweet 13-year-old Japanese girl from a beach in her own country to enslave her as a language tutor for North Korea's spies. If this is not twisted enough, now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financially support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. No nation on earth has an interest in seeing this band of criminals arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocketman is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do.
Of course, the government of North Korea slammed the Trump remarks, even though their UN representative was not in the room to hear them. However, Communist China has already started to restrict mineral purchases from North Korea starting at the beginning of September, at some considerable cost to their own economy. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin warned President Trump about the dangers of U.S. involvement in the affairs of others, which is kind of laughable when you consider that Putin has his mitts all over the Ukraine. I think President Trump learned a valuable lesson from the fire and fury remarks earlier this year. He learned that you could use such rhetoric when you need something stopped immediately. And it was after these remarks that the Chinese stepped up with their own economic steps against the Norcos. However, now that the pressure is on, Trump needs to keep applying it, and that's where his more nuanced UN remarks come in handy. These remarks sent a message to the world, but especially Beijing, and the Chinese heard the message loud and clear. You'd better not be trading with the Norcos, and of course the Chinese are like, we would never trade with that maniac, as they very quietly stopped whatever trading had been going on. An interesting turn of events. The Chinese Central Bank in September announced that it was shutting down the ability for Bitcoin to operate in the People's Republic of China, citing a number of regulatory and lack of control issues. See, one of those pesky things about being a superpower is you end up having to act responsibly like a superpower, and because of this, Communist China is trying to clean up their financial and banking systems. They are cracking down on Bitcoin because of the fact that it is a virtual currency that is hard to track and regulate, and because of concerns over money laundering, which is exactly why North Korea is trying to get involved with Bitcoin, so that they can launder real money from Bitcoins. We will continue to keep an eye on this story, but for the moment I don't believe we're at the brink of World War III. Instead, perhaps we'll see a regional Cold War with some squishy sides, as Communist China certainly doesn't want a war right on their doorstep, and so they might step in on our side to help quell North Korea. That's kind of why they got involved in the first rendition of the Korean War.
We know that the biggest TV star of the last year is Donald Trump. And we all know the Emmys mean a lot to Donald Trump because he was nominated multiple times for Celebrity Apprentice, but he never won. I tell you this, if he had won an Emmy, I bet he wouldn't have run for president. The president has complained repeatedly that the Emmys are rigged. He even went after the host a few years back, tweeting that Seth Meyers is hosting the Emmy Awards is a total joke. He is very awkward with almost no talent. Marbles in his mouth. That's quite an accusation. Any response, Seth? Because unlike the presidency, Emmys go to the winner of the popular vote. What really matters to Donald Trump is ratings. You gotta have the big numbers. I mean, is there anyone who could say how big the audience is? Sean, do you know?
This will be the largest audience to witness an Emmys, period, both in person and around the world.
Yo, first, I want to thank, the great algorithm that put us all here. I want to thank my parents who are in the audience. This is nuts, my brother. I want to thank Trump for making black people #1 on the most oppressed list. He's the reason I'm probably up here.
We have a great final season that we're about to start filming with a lot of surprises that our fabulous writers have cooked up. We did have a whole storyline about an impeachment, but we abandoned that because we were worried that someone else might get to it first.
I suppose I should say, at long last, Mr. President, here is your Emmy. I want to thank my wife. My wife and I had 3 children in 3 years, and we didn't have a child last year during the SNL season. I wonder if there's a correlation there. All you men out there, you put that orange wig on, it's birth control, trust me.
With the beginnings of the 2018 election season already shaping up, it's time for a new Politics City feature. Each month we'll be taking a look at the hot races around the country, sharing some of our insights and giving you some predictions on how each race will go. Currently, the Dems have 4 safe seats in the U.S. Senate, while the GOP has 50 safe seats. This means that 10 seats are in play, which is more than enough to decide which party controls the U.S. Senate from 2018 to 2020. The edge, however, goes to the GOP, strengthening their control over the chamber, as the Dems are defending 8 out of the 10 open seats. Politics City will predict right now, with no races being decided at all, that with that many contested seats, the Dems will slip further into the minority, and the GOP will gain a healthy majority. Here are some of our opening spotlights. In Wisconsin, incumbent Senator Tammy Baldwin will face a tough challenge from the GOP, most probably in the form of State Senator and conservative Leah Vukmir. Vukmir will have some strong backing from the state's GOP, which will also be pushing to give Governor Scott Walker a 3rd term, which should be easy given that Walker was instrumental in getting the enormous Foxconn deal for Racine County. Between Walker's coattails, Vukmir's visibility and popularity, and the fact that Tammy Baldwin has done virtually nothing while in the U.S. Senate, I expect that Vukmir or any GOP candidate will win this seat. In Alabama, we see that former Judge Roy Moore has won his primary against the Trump-backed candidate Luther Strange. However, both Trump and Moore have said that they intend to be on the same page if Moore is elected. He faces Democrat Doug Jones. Jones is not quite a political novice, and he may attract DNC attention in the terms of fundraising, but such efforts would be a waste. Roy Moore has substantial state and national name recognition and already has a sizable voter base to draw upon. He will be hard to beat in the December 2017 special election to fill that seat, and Politics City predicts that he will win. This will mean that we may see the first of what I will call the Trumpification of the U.S. Senate, replacing squished GOPers with people who will back the president's agenda. In Missouri, we have Democrat Claire McCaskill running for another term. This is a seat I believe the GOP will pick up because they nearly beat her even while running Todd Akin of rape-induced pregnancy can be self-terminated fame. This time, the GOP will not be running someone who makes such stupid remarks, and McCaskill may have an uphill battle retaining her seat. Politics City predicts that the GOP will pick up this seat. Moving to the southern Great Lakes region, there is no current polling or information on the Senate race in Indiana, so we'll predict for the moment that the Democrat incumbent Joe Donnelly keeps the seat. In Ohio, the Democrat Sherrod Brown has very strong name recognition and will also probably retain the seat. The most interesting race out of these three might be West Virginia, where Senator Joe Manchin is facing re-election. Manchin is perhaps the reddest of the Dems in the U.S. Senate, and with the popularity of Donald Trump in the coal-rich state, Manchin may either face a strong primary challenge, or he might himself flip to being a member of the Republican Party. However, for the moment, let's just say that he retains his seat as a Democrat. But this is big. A larger GOP majority may allow people like Joe Manchin to go maverick on his party and side more with the GOP in the next couple years. In Nevada, I believe Dean Heller will retain his seat, as the strength of incumbency is very strong in that state. But that could change if a strong DNC candidate emerges. In Arizona, given the illegal immigrant issue and the failure to repeal Obamacare, incumbent Senator Jeff Flake could be a casualty of the Trumpification of the U.S. Senate, and he may be replaced by a GOP candidate willing to support the president's agenda. In the North, we have two elections that might go in opposite directions. In Montana, I believe John Tester is safe because, again, the power of incumbency is strong in the state. However, next door in North Dakota, I believe that Heidi Heitkamp might be in some trouble, as she has been a bit too close to some controversial votes. She might be a weak seat that the GOP can pick up, but in Politics City predicts that this will happen. So here's the map with our current predictions, and as you can see, the GOP picks up 3 seats. This would be enough to have a serious chance of getting conservative-centered, Trump-backed legislation through the U.S. Senate. With the Dems unable to gain control of the U.S. House, and with the situation not likely to change in the U.S. Senate until at least 2022, Politics City believes that the GOP will almost have an easy time of cementing their control over Congress. This will also allow centrists such as Joe Manchin to perhaps caucus with the GOP. And with that in mind, Joe Manchin is our power player of this episode's Politics City's view of the 2018 election.
Welcome to the show. Over the next half hour or so, we are going to go in depth on how exactly the Obama administration, almost literally since its earliest days in 2009, routinely, improperly, and very likely illegally used its spy powers for political gain, targeting everyone from journalists who dared to write critical stories to members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and yes, members of Donald Trump's presidential campaign and transition team. A new report out today from Fox News' Catherine Herridge indicates Samantha Power, the former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, was unmasking, that is, revealing the identities of American citizens caught up in foreign surveillance at such a rapid pace in the final months of the Obama administration that she averaged more than one request for every working day in 2016, and even sought information in the days leading up to President Trump's inauguration, multiple sources close to the matter told Fox News. Two sources who were not authorized to speak on the record said the requests to identify Americans whose names surfaced in foreign intelligence reporting, known as unmasking, exceeded 260 last year. One source indicated this occurred in the final days of the Obama White House. The detail emerged ahead of an expected appearance by Power next month on Capitol Hill. Also out today, Cheryl Atkinson, the former CBS reporter who claimed repeatedly that her computer was hijacked, possibly by the Obama administration, as she was writing deeply critical stories about Operation Fast and Furious, the gun-walking operation headed by Obama Attorney General Eric Holder. Has an article today in The Hill that basically puts into context what we have learned about the Obama administration's apparent snooping on the Trump campaign last year. In 2016, she notes, Obama administration officials searched through intelligence on U.S. citizens a record 30,000 times. To put that into perspective, in 2013, a non-election year, Obama administration's officials searched American citizens just 9,500 times. From January 2016 until after the election, though, that number increased 3 times. What possible reason could there be for that massive of an increase, if not because it was an election year? And now we know through a report on CNN that there was, in fact, a secret FISA court warrant issued that allowed for the wiretapping of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. Even when President Trump on March 4th tweeted that Obama, quote, tapped my wires at Trump Tower, there was widespread scorn and mockery that in no way could the Obama administration be capable of such a thing. Heck, it's the Justice Department. It's not the White House that does that sort of thing. The media, of course, ignoring the possibility that then Attorney General Loretta Lynch was acting on direct orders of President Obama or his right-hand woman, Susan Rice. What we now know, though, is that this fits perfectly into a pattern of what the Obama administration had been doing for all 8 of its years. When it determined that someone or some entity was a threat, was investigating, or was writing stories critical of the Obama administration, the administration would routinely respond by sicking the NSA, the FBI, or the CIA on said target. Atkinson, in her piece in The Hill this morning, notes that a September 21st, 2010 email from the global intelligence firm Stratfor says, quote, John Brennan, who at the time was Homeland Security Advisor for President Obama, he later became director of the CIA. Brennan is behind the witch hunts of investigative journalists learning information from inside the Beltway sources. Note, there is a specific tasker from the White House to go after anyone printing materials negative to the Obama agenda. Parentheses, oh my. Even the FBI is shocked. The Wonder Boys must be in meltdown mode, ... That was released as part of an email dump WikiLeaks put out a couple of years ago. It was from September 10th. It indicated that over the past year at least, the Obama administration had been routinely spying on reporters. This was around the time, by the way, that Operation Fast and Furious was getting going, and it would seem that the big political agenda of the day, passing Obamacare, might have been prompting Obama administration officials to use the intelligence apparatus to go after writers who dared to oppose Obamacare. And it didn't stop with reporters. In 2011, the Obama administration's Justice Department wiretapped Ohio Congressman Dennis Kucinich. He's a Democrat, and he talked about what happened on Fox News earlier this year.
You say something similar happened to you back in 2011. You say this, I can vouch for the fact that extracurricular surveillance does occur regardless of whether it is officially approved. I was wiretapped in 2011 after taking a phone call in my congressional office from a foreign leader. Why did you feel the need to speak out now?
Well, it's important because there are people who are saying about President Trump's claim, oh, it could never happen. Well, frankly, it happened to me. And I had proof because the Washington Times actually let me listen into a tape that was made of a conversation in my congressional office. It was a conversation between myself and a foreign leader. The conversation was approved and cleared by House attorneys who said, yes, you can do that. That's your constitutional right. But someone had intercepted it. And I learned about it 2 years after I left office. Members of Congress ought to be aware that my experience was that my phone wasn't safe in a congressional office. Now, if they can do that to a member of Congress, they can certainly do it to a presidential candidate, and they can do it to private citizens as well.
And as we learn, they will. In 2013, though, the big controversy was again over spying on reporters. Attorney General Eric Holder's Justice Department subpoenaed phone records from the Associated Press, 20 of them, in fact, during a 2-month period in 2012. Now, what was going on in 2012 that the Associated Press might want to be snooped on? It was, of course, an election. The Justice Department would not say, and this is critical, why it sought those records. The Associated Press's CEO, Gary Pruitt, said this was a massive and unprecedented intrusion into news gathering. These records potentially reveal communications with confidential sources across all of the news gathering activities undertaken by the AP during a 2-month period, provide a roadmap to AP's news gathering operations, and disclose information about AP's activities and operations that the government has no conceivable right to know. Critically, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, lied under oath at least twice when the House Intelligence Committee asked him about this. He said that he had no knowledge of this because he had recused himself from this matter. He didn't know about these subpoenas because he had an underling make those subpoenas.
I was recused in that matter, as I described, I guess, in a press conference that I held yesterday. The decision to issue this subpoena was made by the people who are presently involved in the case. The matter is being supervised by the Deputy Attorney General. I am not familiar with the reasons why the subpoena was constructed in the way that it was, because I'm simply not a part of the case.
A couple of days later, the Washington Post reported that Holder's Justice Department had monitored a Fox News reporter. It tracked his visits to the State Department through phone pings. It basically picked up Rosen's cell phone's pings and tried to time when he was using his phone to either email or to make phone calls to try to determine when he was visiting the State Department, try to pinpoint who it was he was talking to. Holder denied that he signed off on this subpoena.
I recused myself because I thought it would be inappropriate and have a bad appearance to be a person who was a fact witness in the case to actually lead the investigation, given the fact, unlike Mr. Cole, that I have a greater interaction with members of the press than he does.
James Cole was his underling who Holder said signed off on the subpoena. May 23rd, that was proven to be a lie and very likely perjury. May 23rd, NBC News was able to confirm Holder personally signed off on the Rosen case. The Defense Department was forced to admit that it was Eric Holder who personally signed off on this. Quote, after extensive deliberations and after following all applicable laws, regulations, and policies, the department sought an appropriately tailored search warrant under the Privacy Protection Act. Later that year, in fact, about a month later, it was determined that the Obama administration's NSA was actually using bulk metadata to essentially spy on all of us. Millions of Americans had their bulk metadata, who they were calling, what numbers that were appearing on cell phone logs, that sort of thing. It was thought to be the stuff of science fiction, of only the most paranoid of minds, but it was confirmed. And it was confirmed shortly after the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, who appears to be at the center of all of this, denied it when asked specifically by a member of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Ron Wyden.
So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
They, of course, did wittingly. And in fact, that prompted a rewriting of the USA Patriot Act to prevent this sort of activity. It was a lie. And as we shall see, James Clapper has routinely lied about what the administration was doing with respect to spying for apparently political purposes. The very next year, a McClatchy News story, July 31st, 2014, an internal CIA investigation confirmed allegations that agency personnel improperly intruded into a protected database used by Senate Intelligence Committee staff to compile a scathing report on the agency's detention and interrogation program, prompting bipartisan outrage and at least 2 calls for Spy Chief John Brennan to resign. Remember, John Brennan, back in 2010, was named in this Stratfor email as being behind the, quote, witch hunts of investigative journalists learning information from inside the Beltway sources. He was the one, according to this email, who charged a, quote, specific tasker from the White House to go after anyone printing materials negative to the Obama agenda. So the Senate Intelligence Committee starts digging around, writes a scathing report about what the CIA was doing. The CIA responds by essentially hacking into this database that Senate Intelligence Committee staff members and members of the committee itself, senators, were using. Once again, a pattern developing. Anyone who is perceived to be a threat to the Obama administration is targeted. That effort apparently ramped up in 2016 when, after an investigation into Paul Manafort yielded nothing and a previous FISA court surveillance order had to expire because of a lack of evidence, in June or July, a wiretapping order, June or July of 2016, when, remember, Manafort had been named the campaign chair of the Donald Trump campaign, all of a sudden, a FISA court order was sought by the Obama Justice Department and issued. Manafort was named campaign chairman in April, I believe early April, and served until August. So he had just a couple of months, but it seems as though the timing is very suspicious. There was no evidence whatsoever to continue with an investigation into Manafort until such a time as he is leading the opposition party's presidential campaign. President Trump, at some point in early 2017, became aware of this. On March 4th, he issued his now infamous tweet, "Obama tapped my wires," tapped the wires at Trump Tower. Paul Manafort was living at Trump Tower. That tweet, though it was widely mocked and widely presumed to be a lie, was in fact true. If Manafort was communicating with Donald Trump, that very likely would have been picked up on surveillance. And remember, in that year, in 2016, Obama administration officials searched through intelligence of U.S. citizens a record 30,000 times. Just 3 years earlier, it was 9,500 times. March 5th, the day after President Trump issues that tweet, James Clapper, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence under Obama, goes on Meet the Press.
Let me start with the president's tweets yesterday. This idea that maybe President Obama ordered an illegal wiretap of his offices. If something like that happened, would this be something you would be aware of?
I would certainly hope so. I can say, obviously I can't speak officially anymore, but I will say that for the part of the national security apparatus that I oversaw as DNI, there was no such wiretap activity mounted against the president-elect at the time, or as a candidate, or against his campaign. I can't speak for other Title III authorized entities in the government or a state or local entity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if the FBI, for instance, had a FISA court order of some sort for a surveillance, would that be information you would know or not know?
Yes.
You would be told this?
I would know that.
If there was a FISA court order on something like this.
Something like this, absolutely.
And at this point, you can't confirm or deny whether that exists?
I can deny it.
There is no FISA court order?
Not to my knowledge.
Of anything at Trump Tower?
No.
This, of course, was a lie. According to CNN's report, there was a FISA court order at Trump Tower of Paul Manafort. You notice, though, how specific and how flat a denial that James Clapper made. No, there was no wiretap. No, there was nothing of that sort. And yes, if there was, I would have known about it. Certainly, something that politically explosive, that there was active monitoring of a presidential candidate's campaign manager, obviously would have gone to the highest levels of government. It would have gone to the highest levels of the Justice Department, and it would have gone to the Director of National Intelligence. It also would have gone to the FBI. Then Director James Comey, though, testified on March 22nd before the Senate Intelligence Committee that there was no such wiretapping at all.
Director Comey, was the president's statement that Obama had his wires tapped in Trump Tower a true statement?
With respect to the president's tweets about alleged wiretapping directed at him by the prior administration, I have no information that supports those tweets, and we have looked carefully inside the FBI. The Department of Justice has asked me to share with you that the answer is the same for the Department of Justice and all its components. The department has no information that supports those tweets.
Okay. At around the same time, the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes was widely criticized when he suggested that the Obama administration was improperly unmasking names as a result of this secret FISA court order. It was seen at the time, back in March, as a ham-handed attempt to defend President Trump's controversial tweet. Susan Rice, who is the former national security advisor, the very next day after James Comey testified, appeared on PBS with Betsy Woodruff and flatly denied that she did any sort of unmasking.
I know nothing about this. I was surprised to see reports from Chairman Nunes on that count today. I mean, let's back up and recall where we have been. The President of the United States accused his predecessor, President Obama, of wiretapping Trump Tower during the campaign. Nothing of the sort occurred, and we've heard that confirmed by the director of the FBI, who also pointed out that no president, no White House can order the surveillance of another American citizen. That can only come from the Justice Department with the approval of a FISA court.
Okay. Notice the specific denial. No one from the Justice Department unmasked. No one. I don't know anything about unmasking. About a month later, though, on CNN's Fareed Zakaria program, she appeared to soften her tone.
What is your reaction to that? It's an extraordinary charge by the President of the United States.
Well, Fareed, it's absolutely false. I've addressed this previously. I think now we've had subsequently members of Congress on the intelligence committees on both sides of the aisle take a look at the information that apparently was the basis for Chairman Nunes's concern and say publicly that they didn't see anything that was unusual or untoward.
There was nothing that was unusual or untoward. She goes on later in that interview to say, I was just doing my job. I was acting in the interests of national security. Could that be that she softened her tone because 3 days ago, CNN reported that she privately told House investigators that she did unmask the identities of senior Trump officials. She claimed to understand why the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates was in New York late last year. This, according to multiple sources. The New York meeting preceded a separate effort by the UAE to facilitate a back-channel communication between Russia and the incoming White House. This, according to these sources. This means that Michael Flynn, who we already know was unmasked, was, along with Jared Kushner and top strategist Steve Bannon, unmasked as part of this investigation. But why? This is the operative question. Was this a legitimate investigation, or once again, was there unmasking of people close to the incoming president, people close to then candidate Trump, being unmasked to try to get some understanding of what was going on? Now, on May 8th, despite the repeated denials, remember, on Meet the Press, James Clapper said, no, there's nothing to this tapping of wires or anything like that. But on May 8th, before the Senate Intelligence Committee, both Clapper and former acting Attorney General Sally Yates, remember the woman who very famously refused to enforce President Trump's executive action on immigration, was subsequently fired for it and seen as a sort of liberal martyr. Both of them, under oath, were forced to admit, yes, they were examining unmasked communications.
Mr. Clapper and Ms. Yates, did either of you ever request the unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
Yes, in one case I did. I can specifically recall, but I can't discuss it any further than that.
You can't. So if I ask you for details, you said you can't discuss that? Is that what you said?
Not here.
Okay. Ms. Yates, can you answer that question? Did you ever request unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
No.
Question 2, did either of you ever review classified documents in which Mr. Trump, his associates, or members of Congress had been unmasked?
Oh, yes.
You have. Can you give us details here in this?
No, I can't.
Ms. Yates, have you?
Yes, I have, and no, I can't give you details.
So, yes, both of them admit to having discussed classified communication with unmasked names of members of the Trump administration, but no, they refused to say anything about it. Yet last night on CNN's Don Lemon program, James Clapper stood by what he said on Meet the Press, that he had no idea about any wiretaps or anything that would lead to the unmasking of Trump officials in the first place.
Well, I stand on that statement that you just replayed, and I cannot comment on the media reporting, which is all we have, about a FISA warrant allegedly lodged against Mr. Manafort. I can't comment on that. I will simply reiterate what I said in March, and I stand on that.
Yeah, and that there is, as far as Trump Tower being wiretapped, according to the president, you say what?
I stand on what I said on the 5th of March on Meet the Press, as you just replayed it.
Okay. So did you know, and I hate to keep, just for clarity, because there's been a lot of reporting on this, right? And people on especially those supporters of the president saying, oh, here's proof. So did you know about a FISA warrant against Paul Manafort at the time?
I did not.
You did not.
FISAs are classified. And so, even if I knew something about it, I couldn't, and I don't. And I will just conclude by saying I stand on what I said on the 5th of March.
Is it possible the president was picked up in a conversation with Paul Manafort?
It's certainly conceivable. Yeah,
Is it likely?
I can't say. I wouldn't want to go there, but I will say it's possible.
It's possible. How likely is it? Well, given what we know about what the Obama administration was doing, given the dramatic increase in the number of people it was investigating, coincidentally starting with the beginning of an election year, January 2016, given the fact that it increased by a factor of 3, the number of U.S. citizens, or the number of times it reviewed intelligence about U.S. citizens in that election year, Given that we know that the ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, whose job does not include in any way whatsoever unmasking American citizens, did so at an average of more than one a day towards the end of the Obama administration, towards the latter half of 2016. At the same time, the election was ramping up. At the same time, remember, this was after the nominating conventions. This was the waning days of the Republican, or rather of the general election, when the Republican candidate was clearly Donald Trump. What was also happening at the exact same time that all of this intelligence gathering on Trump administration officials was going on? There was this narrative forming through the formation of the, quote, Trump dossier, which has been discredited, that Donald Trump and his campaign was colluding with Russia. Even though in the more than 1 year now of investigation into this claim, there has been no evidence made public. There has been nothing to suggest there was any collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. So much so that, in fact, the special counsel, Robert Mueller, has now shifted the focus of his investigation away from Russian collusion and into financial crimes allegedly committed by Paul Manafort and possibly Michael Flynn as well. What are we to conclude about what was going on here? Well, knowing what we know, knowing what I have just outlined about the entirety of the Obama administration weaponizing not just intelligence gathering, but the IRS too, to target political opponents or journalists or anyone, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Congress people like Dennis Kucinich, anyone who the Obama administration perceived to be a threat. Is there any doubt that what it perceived to be as its greatest threat, the greatest threat to the Obama legacy, a Donald Trump presidency, could be targeted as well? It is starting to get to the point, given the totality of the circumstances and all of the evidence that I just laid out, that there was, in fact, surveillance done for political purposes, to gain an edge in a political campaign, and after said campaign was over, to embarrass the incoming president or to harm the new presidential administration through selective leaks that made that administration look bad.
Made clear to our viewers and listeners is that, look, this is the inauguration represented the beginning of his second term.
Yes.
But it also represented the countdown of the end of his presidency.
That's right.
And the reality is, like anything else, you better get what you can while he's there, because look, come 2016, that's it.
Well, you know, I don't know, and I think some people are missing something here. The president has put in place an organization that contains the kind of database that no one has ever seen before in life. That's going to be very, very powerful, and whoever...
In terms of the Organizing for America that he's now shifting to become a 501c4.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. And that database will have information about everything on every individual in ways that it's never been done before, and whoever runs for president on the Democratic ticket have to deal with that. They're going to have to go down with that database and the concerns of those people because they can't get around it. And he's been very smart. I mean, it's very powerful what he's leaving in place. And I think that's what any Democratic candidate is going to have to deal with.